So when we look at defense mechanisms, we're on part 2 of chapter 15, Personality, by the David Myers Psychology 8th edition textbook. So defense mechanisms are created by the ego because the ego cannot sometimes actually accept the reality that is our life. So our ego is going to try and distort it through these little defense mechanisms. So we got to look at a lot. Repression is one. Repression means that you are pushing down unwanted, anxiety-causing thoughts, feelings, or memories. And you push them from the consciousness into the unconsciousness. Now, if you say, I repressed that memory, then you never repressed it because you can't remember if you repress something. The only time people remember that there is a repressed memory is when some trigger actually pulls it back up into the consciousness. That could happen during free association. It could happen during dreams. That is how repressed memories come back into the consciousness. Now, regression is another defense mechanism that Freud comes up with. And with regression, what happens is you go back to an earlier infantile psychosexual stage. So, man, he got married, and he got a bad divorce, and after his bad divorce, he lost his home, he lost everything. So he has to move back in with mom and dad. Now, mom starts to lay out his clothes, starts making his dinner, tucks in his napkin at the top of his shirt, and does all this crazy stuff for him now. That guy has become, not a guy, he's become a kid again. So he's gone from being an adult back to being a kid. And he really likes it. Instead of calling her mom, he calls her mommy. And instead of like asking, Mom, did you wash this? He's like, Mommy, did you lay out my clothes? Okay, so a little crazy, but that is regression. So you go back to an earlier state. You like start talking baby talk. That's what we're talking about. Now, some other more defense mechanisms. So reaction formation is another one. This is when you switch unconsciously, like unacceptable impulses into their opposite. So this is what happens, like what you do is you say, I'm pure and I'm innocent, but you're really not pure or you're innocent. You're actually a very naughty kid, okay? So like you'll say, I don't know who broke the lamp. You know exactly who broke that lamp. It was you. But you are going to blame everybody else. But that's reaction formation. So you take something unacceptable that you don't want to do or you don't want to accept and you make it acceptable. Now, projection is when you disguise your own threatening impulses by attributing them to other people. So you project your faults on other people. Everyone else is messy. Everybody else is disorganized. You guys do this in class. Like, I don't know why you're always picking on me for talking. Well, you were talking, but your fault of talking, you projected on everybody else. So-and-so is always talking more than me. That's projection, guys. Now, some other defense mechanisms. Rationalization is when you take self-justifying things and you try and make them less threatening. So, like, your husband comes home, he's got lipstick on his collar, and it's pink lipstick, and you know that's his secretary's favorite lipstick color. And so you say to yourself, oh, she just told him she was pregnant the day. There's no harm in that. You're rationalizing behavior. Why is his neck got her lipstick on it? And why is she pregnant? Because that's rationalization. You're trying to take something that you don't really want to deal with and you try and rationalize it out. Now, displacement is another thing that happens with defense mechanisms. And this, what you do is you take something that's aggressive and you redirect it towards something that's not as aggressive. So when you're mad at mom and dad, you don't go up and punch your mom and dad in the face. Because if you do, they're probably going to punch you back. Instead, what you do is you slam that bedroom door as hard as you can to show mom and dad who's the boss. But that is displacement. If you really hit your mom and dad, you'd be hurting. You'd probably be in the hospital for a while. Now, Freud is like a rock star in psychology, which means he's got groupies. And his groupies are what we call the Neo-Freudians. And the Neo-Freudians are new Freudians. So Carl Jung is one of his followers. And Freud is so excited when Jung actually follows him because Jung is not Jewish. And so Freud thinks, finally, I've got the regular psychology community paying attention to me. But Freud's already got a lot of people paying attention to him. But he's just excited because a non-Jewish person has latched on to what he believes, and so he believes that now the rest of the world will accept him. So Carl Jung is going to write his collective unconsciousness, and when he's looking at this, what he looks at is your memories and symbols within your memories, but he looks more at symbols across culture. He doesn't necessarily do like what Freud says with your childhood and sexual symbols. He just says that there's symbols throughout our cultures that are shared. So certain myths and images are common in all cultures, like the flooding myth, or a mother being a symbol of nurture and care. Now, another one of these Neo-Freudians is Adler, and Adler tries to come up with this inferiority complex or sibling rivalry. And so what he says is that kids try to, are people who have a feeling of being inferior, strive their whole life to feel superior and powerful. So an inferiority complex or a sibling rivalry complex. Your brother goes out and buys your mom a brand new TV. And it costs $1,000, and it's like a 45-inch television. So you decide to outbest him and get like a movie theater for the house with a 70-inch screen TV. And so now you've spent $2,000 on it, and you pat yourself on your back because you one-upped your brother. You did better than your brother. That is the sibling rivalry or the inferiority complex. We see this with people. They're never happy where they are. They always want to strive to do more, and they're striving because they feel inferior. Now, Karen Horney, what she said is that she said that Freud's whole women are this dark continent, because that's what Freud thought about women. He said women are the dark continent. He said there's no way you're ever going to be able to understand them, so just don't. She says that's crap. So what she comes up with is that it's your peer relationships, your childhood friends who actually make you who you are. So the Neo-Freudians kind of go away from some of Freud's stuff, particularly with the sexual symbols and the sexual meanings and everything, and they kind of come up with their own thing. She particularly said that women don't have a weak superego, as Freud thought, and they don't suffer from penis envy, as Freud thought that the women did. Now, in order to access the unconscious process, you need these projective tools. And projective tools are pretty hard because there is no right or wrong answer, which makes it almost impossible to tell whether someone's got the right answer for this disorder or that disorder. The TAT test is done, and this is just the projective test. So you would look at this picture, and you would come up with a story, and then you would have a psychoanalysis, jot down what you said, and try and come up with meaning symbols within what you said. So you look at this picture, what is it a picture of? You tell the person, and then they psychoanalyze you. The inkblot tests are also something that is used by the psychoanalysis. And so you look at this inkblot, and if you find something, then you're telling the psychoanalysis perspective, and they try and figure out what's wrong with you or what could be wrong with you. And people see all kinds of things. There's normally some parts that, you know, are pretty naughty also in the inkblots. Now, the problem with the projective test is that they lack reliability. There's no consistency in the actual result, and they're not valid. There's no validity in them, so you can't really predict what it's supposed to. So, like, by looking at some of these pictures, are you really supposed to be able to tell if someone has an emotional disorder? So when evaluating the same patient, even if they're highly trained professionals, they can still have different interpretations about it, which means it's not reliable. The other thing about it is that the validity is in question. So projective tests may actually misdiagnose a normal person as somebody who is pathological, meaning they're psychotic. Now, modern research, when we look at the psychoanalysis perspective, personality develops throughout life, and it's not necessarily fixed in childhood. You can change, okay? Who you are at 7 might not necessarily be who you are at 15, 20, or 25. Hopefully, you know, you become a better person as time goes on. Freud also underestimates the actual power of peer influence on the individual. He looked more at your parents and how your parents can screw you up or influence you in life. Gender identity could actually develop before 5 or 6 years of age, which kind of conflicts with his whole genitalia stage. Now, there are other reasons for dreams besides wish fulfillment. Remember, Freud has his little dream theory. It was a wish is a dream your heart makes, right? Okay, he stole it, or Disney stole it from him. Now, there could be more things. Freud also had these things called Freudian slips, and a Freudian slip was like, it was your unconscious coming out all of a sudden. And so, if somebody came up to me and they said, bye, when we just first met, then obviously they don't want to talk to me in Freud's Freudian slip method because they would really be wanting to get away from me. Suppressed sexuality leads to psychological disorders. If you look at time, sexual inhibition has definitely decreased. I mean, Victoria's Secret's everywhere, and y'all don't keep them secret. So the sexual inhibition has decreased, but psychological disorders have not over time. Now, evaluating the psychodynamic perspective. So what we look at here is that repression, what they believe about repression is based on some painful experience into your unconscious mind. Now, if we could actually repress thoughts, wouldn't children, like children who were abused physically or mentally, the death camp survivors, and the battle scar veterans, wouldn't they also be able to repress those painful experiences that they had? But they don't. So repression might be more rare than Freud led us to believe. Freud is right about the unconscious mind, though. Modern research shows that the existence of our non-conscious information processing, it's there. So schemas that automatically control perception and interpretation, parallel processing like vision and thinking, we have implicit memories, and emotions that activate instantly without consciousness. Now, the scientific merits of Freud's theory, they have been criticized. Psychoanalysis is not really that testable, and so because it's not something that you could do with the scientific method, people do go away from it. And a lot of the concepts, the stuff that he does, it comes out of studying sick patients, the abnormal patient, and then he tries to apply it to the whole population. So I'm going to stop here. Well, no, I'm going to keep going. I got 5 minutes. All right. So humanistic perspective. So by the 1960s, a lot of people are starting to react to Freud, and Freud, you know, he's dead now. You know, he lived in a real bad time. World War II was going on when he actually died. So he's really seen the Gestapo and the SS, and he's just had a horrible time. He's fled to London. London gave him security, and that's where he dies. And he dies through assisted suicide. So he kills himself because he's so cancer-ridden from all the 24 cigars the guy smoked in a day. Maybe he suffered from penis envy. We're not knowing. But, you know, like, this is something, this guy has left kind of maybe a negative impact, but the times he lived in were not nice times. You know, the times he lived in were horrible times. So by the 1960s, you know, World War II's over, and people are wanting to start getting back to the good old times. And so the 1960s is a positive time in a lot of people's mind. And so what happens is, people don't like Freud, they shove him out, and we get these happy-go-lucky Maslow and Rogers. So we're going to look at the humanistic perspective. And we've already looked at Maslow when we looked at motivation. So in Self-Actualizing Person, he comes up with you reaching your fullest potential. So when you look at the psychodynamic perspective, it was about, you know, all the problems that you have. Now when you look at Maslow's, it's about you being the best you can be. So physiological needs is water and food. Okay, you got to have that. Once you get that, then you can move up here to safety needs. This would be like a house, shelter, safety, okay? Then, once you get that, then you can go to belonging. So you can belong to a group, you got friends, they have friends, you're loved, and you love in return. Then you can go up here to esteem needs. Now, in esteem needs, what you're looking at is like being actually told, thank you, you did a great job on that project. So somebody's got to actually give you a little clap every once in a while. Then, once all this is in check, then you can move up to self-actualization, which means you are the best you that you can be. Now that is such a great theory because everybody could technically reach their fullest potential. The only problem is that this theory, there's the people who criticize it. Like, people say, hey, evil people probably feel pretty good about themselves, or people who are, you know, have committed horrendous acts. Like John Wayne Gacy, he killed kids. But John Wayne Gacy had food, he had water, he had a house, that's where he buried all the kids. He had belonging, he had a family, he had kids, they loved him. He felt pretty good about what he did when he started stacking up their bodies. And then the self-actualization, maybe he didn't feel like he could have, you know, maybe he felt he could have killed more kids, but he did reach, in his opinion, his fullest potential, which is scary for self-actualization. Now, Rogers comes up with the growth and fulfillment with the unconditional positive regard. In unconditional positive regard, what he's saying is that people accept you no matter what. No matter whatever your feelings are, your family loves you for you and you only. Okay, so they accept you no matter what. So when Scott Peterson killed Lacey Peterson, his wife, who was pregnant, his parents came out on the news and said, you know, we still love our son. No matter what he's done, we still love him. We don't understand what he did. We didn't raise him to be that way, but we still love him. That's unconditional positive regard. So whether you make all A's or you make B's, your parents still love you just the same. So assessing the self. In an effort to assess personality, Rogers asked people to describe who their ideal person would be and who they actually are. So he would ask you, who do you think you are, your ideal you, and who are you actually? And if those two didn't match up, there was a miscongruence problem. So whenever he would ask you, how do you see yourself? If your ideal person was honest, virtuous, okay, and then the reality was the total opposite end of the spectrum, then there was a miscongruence, and you would have to adjust to get your ideal you and your real you to be the same. Evaluating the humanistic perspective, it's really pervasive in education, counseling, education, child rearing, and management. They all look at this kind of stuff as a positive thing. It's very vague, and there's no real scientific basis here, and maybe gender identity, again, develops before 5 or 6 age. I'm going to stop here, and we're going to move to the trait perspective in part 3, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it done in 30 minutes or less, but it's not going to happen. This isn't a pizza store.